You know, words matter, and I know we're here really discussing specific language on authorization for use of military force, but this is puzzling. You know, Secretary Kerry, you said this authorization needs to be extremely limited, but show the commitment of the United States. I mean, I don't see how you reconcile those two terms. There have been an awful lot of loose statements here. Let's talk about the joint resolution passed on September 18th, 2001, and why the current activity is tenuously connected to that at best. That joint resolution was to authorize the use of the United States Armed Forces against those responsible for the recent attacks launched against the United States. Specifically, it said that the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future attacks of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. I don't hear anything about successor organizations. So again, I'm puzzled by the fact that the administration is firmly of the view that they already have statutory authority to conduct what they're conducting. And I guess there's really nobody pushing back that hard on that. But now we're talking about a new authorization, and I'm puzzled by the fact that any commander-in-chief, if they believe they have the authority to do what's being conducted, why would they want to limit that in any way, shape, or form? You know, particularly when, Secretary Kerry, you said you want to dispel any doubt, send an unmistakable message. Let me just read two other authorizations. This is the authorization we're discussing because we're talking about it, but let's talk about the specific words. It says the President is authorized subject to the limitations in subsection C to use the armed forces of the United States as the President determines to be necessary and appropriate against ISIL or associated persons or forces as defined in section 5. Man, this sounds like a contract. C, limitations. The authority granted in subsection A does not authorize the use of United States Armed Forces in enduring offensive ground combat operations. Okay, that's not a real dispelling of doubt. Duration of this authorization. The authorization for use of military force shall terminate 3 years after the date of the enactment of this joint resolution unless reauthorized. I don't know. I'm not seeing that sending an unmistakable message. Let me read you one other authorization. This was passed on December 8th, 1941. The President is hereby authorized and directed to employ the entire naval and military forces of the United States and the resources of the government to carry on war against the Imperial Government of Japan and to bring the conflict to a successful termination. All of the resources of the country are hereby pledged by the Congress of the United States. Now, if we're discussing language to dispel all doubt, to send an unmistakable message, General Dempsey, which authorization as a military man would you want to have at your back?
Senator, I'm not going to compare something from 1941, which was a state-on-state global conflict, to a conflict with a non-state actor. I was consulted on this AUMF.
Secretary Carter, it's always puzzled me, why would anybody want to pick a fight with the United States? Why is ISIS putting out on videotape the beheadings, the brutal, the barbaric beheadings of Americans, of other Westerners? Why would they do that? Why would anybody want to pick the fight with the United States?
Senator, I can only say and read as you can hear and read what they say, which is that they intend to create a Islamic State, and they regard us and our friends and allies as standing in the way of that, and therefore they have shown their willingness to attack Americans and attack our allies and interests.
But again, I would never pick a fight with Chairman Dempsey's military.
Well, I think
the only way I'd pick that fight is if I really didn't think America would be serious about coming back to defeat me, to try and accomplish that goal that President Obama established. I do want to talk a little bit about the current ground forces currently allied against ISIS. General Dempsey, do we know basically what the force structure is? I mean, how many Iraqi security forces are there? How many Kurds? How many in the Shia militias that are Iranians, sponsored by Iran? I mean, what is the current force structure of boots on the ground?
The number, I have to get back to you for the record on the exact number, Senator.
Well, I'm happy to get ballpark figures.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Tikrit operation, for example. There's approximately 1,000 Sunni tribal folks. There's one brigade of the Iraqi security forces, which numbers approximately 3,000. A couple of hundred of their CTS, their counterterrorist service. Those are the MOD-sponsored forces, and there's approximately 20,000 of the Popular Mobilization Force, which are the Shia militia.
So the Shia militia dramatically outnumber the Iraqi security forces in this.
They do.
And the Shia militias are pretty much Iranian-sponsored, correct?
I would describe them as Iranian-trained and somewhat Iranian-equipped.
Secretary Carter, I think you said that the outcome of Tikrit will explain an awful lot of things. I mean, what do you mean by that?
I believe it was General Dempsey who made that statement, so I'll let him explain himself, but I agree with it.
By that? Here's what I meant by that, Senator. There's no doubt that the combination of the Popular Mobilization Forces and the Iraqi security forces and they're going to run ISIL out of Tikrit. The question is what comes after in terms of their willingness to let Sunni families move back into their neighborhoods, whether they work to restore the basic services that are going to be necessary, or whether it results in atrocities and retribution. That's what I meant.
Well, Senator Rubio was actually, basically his line of questioning was laying out our concern that if it's Iran that is at the tip of the spear here, if they're the ones sponsoring the victories, they're going to have influence in Iraq, and that's going to be very difficult, very tenuous, very dangerous for the regional peace, correct? Secretary Kerry, do you want to address that one? Aren't you concerned about Iran's growing influence in Iraq?
I'm concerned about Iran's growing efforts in the region, and we've made it very clear that is an administration concern. Their influence in Yemen, their influence in Beirut and Lebanon, their influence in Syria, in Damascus and Hezbollah, and of course their influence in Iraq. But I think you have to look historically. I mean, a lot of things are happening right now in the region, to be honest with you. And the history between Persian Shia and Arab world and Arab Shia is complicated. Remember, Iraq and Iran had a 10-year war, 8 to 10-year war. People were gassed. Iranians did not respond with gas. There are a lot of sort of interesting facets of sort of how that played out. And yes, Iran's influence has spread at this moment, and we're deeply concerned about it. But if you're concerned about it now, think of what happens. And I hear this, we heard it in the floor of the House recently, and you hear it elsewhere, if they had a nuclear weapon and they were doing that. That's why this administration believes the first step is to prevent the access to the nuclear weapon or prevent their ability to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's our goal, first to try to do that diplomatically. And if it cannot be achieved diplomatically, then we all have a lot of options available to us. But we are eyes wide open with respect to what is happening, and all of those issues, we have made it clear to our friends in the region and elsewhere in the world. They don't disappear. If we were to get an agreement to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, and we're all satisfied that that, in fact, it will be the conclusion, we still have all these other issues with Iran. And we will all need to be working on the ways in which, and this is exactly what we're doing, GCC members, in fact, will be coming here to Washington the next month to continue the dialogue we had in the region last week. And I'm confident that we will, all of us together, take the steps necessary to counter what Iran is doing in other ways.
My final point, and as quick as I'm not seeing the full commitment out of this administration, and as a result, we're seeing the growing influence, a very dangerous influence of Iran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kane.